My first question is like, what does leading in the age of AI mean to you?
So first thing is you need to make the right choices. We see at the moment there's a massive hype. It's called the bandwagon effect, which is one of the many unconscious biases we have. And first, AI is really important. It's a massive game changer. It's a disruptor to the market. However, we see money getting poured in, and when you look into, I got my education and I started in AI when I worked for Microsoft back then. It was still called machine learning and what we call it. So way before it was called AI. At the moment, you see money getting poured in like we haven't seen in a long, long time. And at the same time, I got my education from the Wharton Business School, University of Pennsylvania, the Vanderbilt, so reasonably well-researched educational facilities. And they found out that more than 60% of all the investments there are either behind expectations or far behind expectations. So let's say when you are working for me and I give you a salary raise, and I think 60% of the time you are behind expectations, I think reasonably quickly I will have a chat with you that this is not what I expected. And with AI, that does not happen. I understand risk capital. I understand some people want to be early movers to have the big advantage when you're first in the market. You have a massive, massive edge over the market. You basically outcompete anyone else for a couple of years. However, there's a certain frustration amongst people who work in companies that they see we don't have money for this, we don't have money for that, but there's always money as soon as you put an AI sticker on it, suddenly there's money available. So AI and leadership means first get the education. The discussion around AI, I mean, speed of light might be fast, but not as fast as people today claim to be an AI expert. Anyone became an AI expert overnight on Facebook, Instagram, social media, LinkedIn, anywhere as an AI expert. Anyone is replacing thousands of teams with just one magic script, and it never works. You really need to get the education first. Get proper experts there, people who have the qualifications and the experience, not only one of the two. Education, experience, excellence, eloquence are the four E's you probably should have here. I am a big fan that you take certain risk. I know there's a huge cultural aspect to it. I'm born in Germany, then lived in the UK, worked globally, and I know that Germans are quite risk averse without sticking to stereotypes, but when we look into science, there are cultural aspects to it. Take reasonable risk, but be aware that when you take many of these risks and they don't pay off, sooner or later someone will sit in front of you and say, you can't deny my salary raise. Because when I see how many AI projects we had here, and none of them basically brought anything to the table, you can't deny my 5,000 salary raise annually and then waste 500,000 on another pointless AI project. So be wise with these choices, because otherwise you frustrate people, because you cannot say no job is at risk. I think some jobs are, but many jobs are not. The best result you get is not when humans do something on their own or when the AI does something on their own. It's either AI creates something and you refine it, or you create something, AI refines it, you refine it again. So machine and human working together at the moment is the best result we can get. But when you just pour money into AI and you say we don't have money for salary raises afterwards, anyone knows you just want to replace people. That is pretty obvious. So be sure that you make wise choices here. And the discussion around AI is a discussion which hovers around science, education, qualification, and experience on the matter.
And because AI, it kind of came around quite quickly, and it's like you said, it's all of a sudden
Yeah.
everyone's changing to it. We have to do this, we have to do that. Let's pour money into it. And in that, there can be a lot of misconceptions. What are a few that you would like to debunk right here, right now?
When we talk about misconceptions, is many people think as soon as AI is there, AI does it for you. And looking at different studies, AI is not only hallucinating, AI sometimes gives you straightforward wrong information. Some people say 40%. I think that number is a bit too high. That study which they refer to was probably not the best, but there is a significant share of information which is debatable, not 100% correct. And then people say, well, when I have to research the information afterwards, I don't need an AI anymore. And that is not correct. When you do basic research, let's say you tell me something, you say, do XYZ. Another human tells me to do XYZ. What I do immediately is, what is your motivation? What is your background? When someone who's a real estate investor tells me you should buy your own place instead of renting, yeah, I know, because you want to sell a place to me. That's your personal interest. So we have quite a number of misperceptions that people think AI will solve everything, and it will not solve everything. When you work in sales, sales is still made between humans. The human connection so far cannot be replaced, but AI can massively help. When you see that certain automotive companies suddenly have robocalls, which they called it back in the days, but not with a robo voice. You have a natural voice being able to talk you through to an appointment, and your salesperson on site suddenly takes over once they pick up the car for their first test drive. That is a great moment of actually getting things together by AI. And when you ask salespeople, hey, would you be happy to only do the appointment and not do the cold calling anymore or the warm calling? They would probably say, yeah, I think that's pretty good, because as soon as they arrive, they are already hot leads. So when an AI takes this over, I can just close more gigs, I can just close more business. So be aware of the fact that it's not going to solve everything, but it will help you. AI is pretty much, you can say, it's artificial intelligence, but it's also assistant intelligence.
But where do you think AI will have the biggest impact on leadership decision making?
I think AI is pretty good when you want to have a good picture of probably your own personal biases. When you say, hey, I have the following situation, and you describe it very well, and you say, I tend to do this decision, or you simply ask, what do you think is the decision I should make, and you probably don't have a coach available immediately, AI can give you an overview of different aspects, which you probably do not have. We are all humans. We are all subject to unconscious biases. And when you look into, for example, the Chartered Management Institute right here around the corner in London, they found out in a study that 82% of all leaders had 0 minutes of leadership training. So 0 minutes. Just imagine, I would go to, let's say, the Guardian newspaper or the Telegraph or any kind of newspaper, and I say, look, I have no idea about journalism, but do you have a job? They say, maybe a bit foundation level knowledge would be good. And with leadership, they just say, oh, it's only about humans. Just go for it. And that's, of course, not a viable solution. It's now picking up, but the only reason why people pick up leadership training is because they see that they can't get away with leadership misconduct as they could do in the past. So I think AI can be a great help for certain situations, but always in addition to the human factor that we have. It's not replacing the human factor as of yet.
Right, because that's what I wanted to touch on. How does AI change like strategic thinking and decision making?
So let's say you look at the usual board. And of course, you can now say, well, when you have an international corporation, the board should be a diverse group of people of different backgrounds. Okay, reality check. That's not the case. When we look into different, some companies are doing very well. Many companies have either networks, almost like insider deal-ish, clique-ish networks, where one person hires another person, which is quite close to themselves. So the effect is called isomorphism. Iso, Greek for equal, morph for appearance. Usually you hire people you like. Which people do you like? The one who are quite similar to you. And that means you also have a certain filter bubble. You don't see certain aspects of life because you all have a certain social background. And you also have a certain echo chamber. When someone of high level of power says, I think ABC is right, what do you think? Most likely people probably say BC I think is good and A is okay, but they probably will not say I think it's complete rubbish. You should do DEF, because the disbalance of power is just too strong. And AI can give you a more neutral view as long as the AI is properly trained. When I see companies, for example, saying we use AI in recruiting, which in many countries isn't even legally possible, still some companies do it without knowing that they offend the law. In some countries you can do it. But when I see companies saying, "Oh yeah, we took all the old people, so all the old CVs, and then we basically trained our AI based on 400 people we had in the last 5 years." When you train AIs based on n equals 400, I wish you all the best with your lawsuits coming in. Even large companies, a large logistics company had to take their recruiting bot offline because they clearly saw that there's a bias in there. When you have biased data from 20 years and you train your AI on it, you just put the bias with a turbo button into reality. And there's a very well-known, internationally well-regarded, it's a great software. However, one of the major software vendors at the moment have a lawsuit against them, which is still ongoing, about discrimination, because someone said, I put in different CVs, and as soon as my age went over 40, the answer was always no. And it was always at certain times. When I apply on a Saturday at 11:30 p.m. and 11:41 I get a no, I know there's no human sitting there reading through my CV. It's an automated no. And what was the difference? Only the age changed in my CV. So let's see how this will go. Usually these kind of lawsuits end with a settlement, so no one has to admit any guilt. But you do want to hire the right people. And when you put bias into an AI, you need to have massive sets of data, and that is a very complex procedure where you really have to be aware what kind of software you implement. Way too often I see a certain expo somewhere, suddenly someone says, oh, we have this AI tool. And when I only ask them, so which AI model do you use? And they say, like, yeah, AI. And I say, which model do you use? And they, yeah, AI. Which model exactly? yeah, it's artificial intelligence. We just put data in there, and then it does something. Run as fast as you can, because quality assurance, quality management, data assurance, you need to have a whole team there to make a proper AI. When you say, hey, at home I could create my own chatbot, that's perfectly fine. If you have a cafeteria running and people get in and out to see the opening hours or whatever, that's perfectly fine. But when I say you run a cafeteria and you upload all the ingredients, and someone says, okay, your legal liability will rely on that chatbot. Are you sure that you have all the ingredients in there? And suddenly people slow down a bit and think, yeah, I think it's pretty up to date. Pretty up to date? Is it or not? Yeah, not quite. And there you are. So suddenly, when the liability comes around the corner, people hopefully reconsider a bit more. I'm a big fan of AI. It will help us massively, but we need to be smart with decision and not rush to anything just because there's an AI sticker on there.
Right. And so that's like one wrong way or many wrong ways to do it.
Yeah.
What would you say is like the right way? How do companies and leaders, how can they use it to their advantage and not have this bias?
Yeah. So first, you need professional unconscious bias training, and you will see that you became victim to quite a number of unconscious biases. You only get better as soon as you know it. As soon as you claim you don't have unconscious biases, check for the word. It's called unconscious for a reason. So when you say you have no unconscious biases, you already contradicted yourself and international scientific evidence. So get professional unconscious bias training. From there, when you want to choose an AI, look at what the market has to offer. It's perfectly fine to use your network, but never be in favor of someone just because you know them. And as soon as you have different AI tools, get the demos and ask specialized questions. And these questions must be led by AI experts. Maybe you need external help for that, but you need to ask proper, what is the model behind that? How did you implement that? How do you train it? How do you have quality assurance? So when you have one of these amazing startups, and there are many amazing startups out there, but when someone tells me I have an amazing AI system and we have 4 people working there, I'm really, so either you have an amazing person that gives you money to do all the external work, but quality assurance when it comes to data and integrity and ethics cannot be done by 4 people on the side while you are sitting there programming. So have a proper pitch, get experts in, and then you will make way better decisions. And as soon as there's a hype somewhere, be aware that hype, bandwagon effect, and FOMO, also unconscious biases, question what you're doing there. Is it just you're running after it because any of your competitors does it, or is there any actual reasons why you do it? Because we've seen way too many pieces of software which hyped up and then disappeared somewhere in the drawer, and people say, yeah, we're not going to talk about that anymore.
Okay. I want to move on to your background in sales.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about like leadership in sales. And now we're coming to the end of 2025. Looking into 2026, what do you say defines a strong sales leadership?
So first, of course, when you lead people in sales, always be aware that there's always a certain political game, because probably we're now recording this at the end of the year. So what probably is happening right now, people are sitting there and every single salesperson will tell them, oh, the economy is so tight, I can't achieve anything next year. And they probably know that they can achieve something. That there's always a bit of a game going on. They want to have the goals as low as possible, so their OTE, on target earning, will be higher than ever before. Just live with that. Just live with the fact. However, be aware that as a sales leader, you need to be able to empower people. I see many sales leaders who were rock stars in sales, and then they become sales leaders, mostly because they wanted the income. However, when you are a sales leader, your job is not to be the best salesperson in the room. Your job is to empower people to become the best salespeople they can ever be. And that means you need to be able to train them properly, to onboard them properly, to coach them properly. And also, and that's very hard for many people to learn, and that's one of the main reasons why many excellent salespeople fail in sales leadership, the spotlight is not on you anymore. The spotlight is on your team and probably on certain team members. And you are in the background doing the background work. That is what sales leadership often is: empower others. And when you want to be the rock star in the spotlight, cool, just be that and be great at that for the next 40 years. But if you move into sales leadership, it means you have to put your own personality or ego behind. Because when you still think you can go to any client appointment, you can jump into any meeting, and then you say, oh, I am just good with people, I am just good with people. I'm so good with people. So, yeah, I didn't prepare for this meeting because I'm good with people, Michal, I'm just good with people. That is not a strategy anymore today. People are very aware of sales tactics, so you need to be an expert on the matter. Don't interfere. When your salespeople have an amazing preparation and they meet with a client, don't spontaneously join and ruin everything by just saying one wrong phrase, which ruins their whole strategy. Be aware that salespeople are annoyed about this. Good sales leaders know how to empower people and stay in the back. And we need more of these people and less ego in the room.
On the topic of people in leadership positions within sales, I can imagine one of the things they struggle with the most is keeping a team motivated.
Yeah.
Because it's month to month, you can reach a high target and get a good budget or goal, and then you start from zero again. And doing that every
Yeah.
month, how would you keep them motivated?
Yeah. So first, you have to create the right circumstances. The amount of discussions I have, especially around the topic of, oh yeah, we get back to the office. So I ask them, okay, why do you get back to the office? Yeah, because the CEO told us to do so. And let's get that straight. When your business model is relying on anything on site, it's perfectly reasonable to do that. When, for example, WeWork or Regis or, I don't know, Goldman Sachs, who are massively invested into real estate, when you say, hey, we make our money from real estate and on-site meetings, so our people should be on site to live and walk the talk, that's perfectly fine. But often at the moment, people are just rambling. Oh yeah, I heard of this one company where things didn't work, and this one employee didn't work too well, and suddenly you just punish anyone for that. That is just a really poor decision. And besides that, when you have scientific evidence, Professor Thiel Neely, Harvard University, for more than a decade now is doing research on remote work, and it works when it's done properly. And when you say it's not working for you, hear the news. When there's scientific proof that it works and it doesn't work in your business, who could be the problem? Could be the employees, could be the room, but could be you. So be aware that first you have to create the right circumstances. So let them allow it to work as they are most productive with the best tools available. So don't go for cheap, don't go for, oh, we don't have a CRM system, the Excel file will do. No, it won't. So you have to create the right circumstances. Then you have to set ambitious goals. And one thing is very important here. Realistic goals will not get you anywhere with salespeople because they are probably good enough to just tell you this is the maximum and they knew already, I'm going to outperform you in 3 months' time. So set ambitious goals. However, they need to be somewhere feasible for anyone. In addition to that, be aware that, and this is something where we now have to see the leader side here, there's something which is called nature of job. Nature, when someone, for example, says, I'm really good with people as soon as they walk through the door, but I'm just really bad at cold calling. I don't like to get cold outreach to people. When this is part of your job descriptions, you can't just bail out of that and say, I only do the comfortable part of sales. One of the reasons why you get more money in sales is because you get clients through the door who didn't exist before. Sales starts at the first no. When people start no for the first time, that's where you see if a salesperson is able to cope, recover, and get clients through the door, yes or no. You will never make 100%. No one expects that. But as soon as you say, oh, I actually only can deal with people who are already interested and who already gave us the contact data, that's barely sales. That is basically administering customer contacts and taking care not too many goods go through the door. You're basically guarding the company's goods. And that's not a reason to give you great money. Many people go into sales because you can make more money. And it's not as, let's say, when you are very good at sales, people take a bit of a lighter look at your degrees and qualification, which is sometimes helpful, sometimes not. It's a debatable thing. But when you're good at sales, you can have a way quicker career than in many other places. But it comes with a price tag. When you say, I want to make great money, and part of your job is cold acquisition, cold calling, networking, 2 evenings a week, do that. And when you want to keep them motivated, great circumstances, great leadership, ambitious but realistic. I go with ambitious goals, not with realistic. They need to be somehow feasible. That's important. But the ambition and then the support of you as a leader is what really motivates them. And of course, one thing is extremely important. Don't play the envy game. I can tell you from one aspect, which I saw during an expo. At one expo, we were talking about, should you cap people's commission? And I can tell you when you should cap people's commission. When you, for example, say you are a major, let's say you are IBM, and you got this big computer center sold for a nation. You create a nationwide computer center. The salesperson did a lot of things to make this happen. However, the brand of IBM also did a major thing on that. So when you say the impact of the brand is so big, that probably you did a part of the job, but the brand, which existed for decades before, also did part of the job. So your salary is capped at a certain point. I can somehow understand that, but I can tell you what will happen. As soon as someone says, "Oh, I can sign the contract in December if you want," the salesperson will say, "I think you signed it in January because my salary is capped. I'm already at my 100% goal achievement. So I will just make up a reason why I can't send you this contract. It's still with legal, blah, blah, yada, yada, yada." And then they magically have business coming through the door in January. When you are a mid-sized business, you cannot cap people's salaries whatsoever. Your brand is not going to make the cut. Hardly anyone knows you. If you cap people's salaries, and that is a discussion I had at one of the Zukunft Personal, which is one of the largest people development expos and fairs in Cologne, which we have every year, and I gave 10 speeches there in 3 days. So it was quite an event. And one leader told me, "We're capping salaries because otherwise our salespeople would make more money than some people on executive and board level." Then hello, executive and board people. If you want to make that money, hear the news. Become a salesperson. So if you just out of spite and envy cap people's sales incomes, they get clients through the door. Of course, you have to appreciate what anyone does in the company. We shouldn't have a culture which only hovers around sales. But a major factor for demotivation is when someone just draws a line in the sand and say, "Okay, no more commission from here." And when they say, "Okay, why do you draw the line here and not a bit higher?" You say, "Because I just told you so." That is the number one demotivator. So great circumstances, great leadership, ambitious goals, and also a reward scheme. Because when you do more, people want to have more. And by the way, also accept, some people say, "Hey, I do more and get more." But some people also say, "Look, I reach my goal and then I prefer to have a bit more time off." Accept that as well. I know that I struggled with that for a way too long time because I sat there and think, you can make more. Why do you stop? But when people are fine with what they do and they reach their goals, we are all cool with that. You can't force people to do more. And but by the way, I'm not going to mention the company here, but one very well-known job platform in Central Europe had a salesperson that made 3 million euros revenue per year as a single sales rep in the company. His goal was 1.5 million, so he did 3.2. And suddenly his leader showed up and said, "Yeah, but you didn't do the 50 cold calls per week." Exactly. Yuri is exactly. So they said, "Have you seen my revenue numbers?" So there's the could you just leave me in peace? And next week, the sales manager shows up again and says, "Look, you again didn't do your 50 calls. You need to have 50 cold calls a week." And the person that I outperformed my goals by 100%, I'm not going to do cold calls here. I have enough other work to do. And they annoyed him so much that after a year, he left. So congratulations for getting someone out of the door who made 3 million. So you're now sitting there with no one doing €0. So insisting on certain aspects when people reach the goal in different... I'm always been a fan of networking and cold calling. I learned it the hard way. I'm born and bred Northern German. We're not natural networkers, believe me. We are not talking to anyone usually. That's the Northern German attitude. So I learned it the hard way, but I learned how it worked. But as soon as you insist on something, when someone says, "Hey, I had sales reps in my company," and they said, "Look, I'm not big fan of calling," and I gave them all the methods, but they said, "I do networking and then I do emails," and some people got their goals. I don't care how they reach their goals as long as it's legal and legitimate. Both, not one of them. Not just legal, not legitimate, or legitimate but not legal. Both, legal and legitimate. It's really demotivating when you have someone as a sales leader who simply says, "I want it this way and you all have to obey to me." Certain things, when someone, for example, does not meet their goal and they do 7 calls a week, then it's perfectly reasonable to ask, "Look, you're making 7 calls a day and you don't reach your goals. What do you do all day long?" Because seven calls a day, you do, when you start at 9 a.m. in the morning and you do 7 calls, it's 9:35 probably, or maybe 10, and then you have 7 calls done. 4 people not in the office, 2 people don't have time, so 1 person you had a proper chat with. Cool. And the rest of the day, "Oh yeah, I did PDFs and online research." Okay, then you have to say, "No, this is just not working." But when someone hits their goals and is legal and legitimate, let them do so.
Mm. And to wrap up the sales section, I wanted to ask, like, this is more for people in sales. What advice or what would you say to people who are experiencing a month where there's a lot of dips or they're not like hitting their goals or there's maybe a lack of demotivation or rejection?
Mhm.
what have you said to previous employees in the past to get them back up and stay motivated?
Yeah, so first, when you are in the recruiting process, you have to check if people are able to handle rejection. That is something we have to check very early. Second, when people don't meet their goals, that is where the real learning happens. Let's face it, when you start, I started with a tech company when the IT bubble was still up and running. So you basically picked up the phone and says, look, I have a computer, and they purchase it no matter what. And suddenly the IT bubble burst, and suddenly you had lots of no's. And that's where you see who's actually able to do the job. A certain level of rejection can always be handled with objection handling. However, a certain level of rejection is simply part of the job. And and of course, many people say don't take it personally because they don't know you, and it isn't meant in a personal way. But there are certain people who can't handle it, and then maybe sales is not for you. However, your sales leader has the job to help you on the way to be able to handle rejection, and then you see where can we do something, and where maybe our offer isn't just great, our product isn't really a fit, and where are we just simply flogging a dead horse and trying to get something out of that while it's obviously nothing's going to happen. That is something where your leader has to help you. However, people also have to accept that when you work in sales, nature of job, then a certain level of rejection is always part of the game. Way too many managers and sales leaders simply tell people you have to meet that goal. You have to meet that. I don't care how. Just get me the numbers, and that is bad leadership. We have to sit down, have to have personal talks, and then put a plan together. Okay, you did this so far. At the moment, you do 20 calls a day. We have to up that to 40 calls a day. At the moment, you write 2 proposals a week. You probably have to get it up to 10 at the moment. So what do we have to do to get to 10 proposals? How many calls do you need to have? How many phone calls? How many demos, how many online meetings, how many personal meetings to get to that goal. But you have to work to that together. Experienced salespeople often know how to do that, but especially more junior ones are just helpless. And then you feel just lost somewhere in space between rejection, no sayers, pressure from your boss, and you just don't know what to do. And that's where either great leadership kicks in and helps, or as a leader, you fail and people then leave the organization, or even worse, you fire them and they will put the bad reputation on you and your employer brand.
On the topic of leadership and how to be a leader for other people, now how to self-leadership, how do you define that, and why does it matter? Because there's, of course, you can have your boss, you can have a team, but what about the work you do yourself?
Yeah. So self-leadership, probably many people have been at the place or in the place where you say, I'm good at what I'm doing, but you get to a point where you actually wonder, what's the point of all this? And when you get to the point of what's the point, you just keep dragging yourself on. Sooner or later, you will either have, worst case, you're going to quit your job and do something completely else, or you will have psychological aspects in your life which you do not want to have and probably need professional help. Self-leadership means you need to have a goal for yourself. Why are you doing what you're doing? And this is nothing spiritual. This is nothing esoterical. And I strongly warn about anyone telling you, oh, you have to find your North Star and it's all about just the attitude. No, it's not about the attitude. Sometimes you have very difficult situations in your life due to personal circumstances which are beyond your control. It is anytime I see a motivational, inspirational speaker telling people it's only about the attitude, this usually comes from people of a privileged background who never faced any kind of backlash. And they simply say, life is pretty easy when you have the right attitude. Yeah, well, I grew up with your amount of money. I will be relaxed as well. Always look at what is your personal situation? What is it you can change? And when there are certain things you cannot change. So, for example, when I worked at a pharmaceutical company, I was really wondering, should I have a coming out at the end of the 90s in a large corporation? I studied teaching, so I really got into this. I had to work my way into it, and I really thought maybe I lose my job over this. On the other hand, do I want to hide myself anytime I go to work? And I said, I'm not going to do that. Definitely not. So I came out, and it went very, very well. So hats off to this London-based pharmaceutical international corporation, which some people might now know. They did very well with that. You have to find the place where you can say, this is something I like to do. And very important is you also need to be good at it. Because some people, and that's again where the motivational speakers kick in, where they say, oh, just follow your passion. Look, I'm very passionate about football. And as a football player, I'm absolute rubbish. So if I follow my passion in football, I will not make a single penny off it, and I will die very poor, in a very poor condition on all counts. Following your passion is one thing, but it's way more recommendable to do what you're good at. So follow your passion, but do what you're good at. Find something where you have passion and where you're good at, because just passion is not enough. And when you are the second best in any interview, hear the news. Runner-up doesn't pay the rent. So when you are reasonably good at interviewing for jobs, but you're always the runner-up, you will not land a single job. Find something you're passionate about, but also find something you're good at. Because when you're not good at it, you will not have a life which is satisfactory.
And on that topic of like self-leadership, is there a habit that someone listening or watching can do today, even if it's just like 10% every day, a habit that they can do to strengthen their own self-leadership?
Yeah, so first, one hint, as soon as someone tells you there are success habits, look into science, there are not. So very important. There's not this one habit which makes people successful. I know that there's a whole industry thriving on selling you the oh so secret habits. They don't exist. So very important is habits is when you set yourself a goal. So for example, when I told myself, look, I like to have an MBA. I mean, I come from a very small village in northern Germany. People with MBAs were from a different planet. I heard of MBAs in American movies, and they came from very different families, very different places. So MBA was just something different, not for me. And then, yeah, you could get an MBA in London. Yeah, sure, right. I am from that village getting an MBA. No. And I found out I can. However, the habit I had to put myself into, because some people do an MBA besides full-time working. For me, it was never an option to go back to full-time studying. I had to do it besides work. And my habit was I had very specific time frames where I had to do the academic work. And sticking to these time frames is extremely important. And as soon as you start to do it, very quickly you can form a habit out of that. And as soon as you listen to people who are more experienced in the academic world and they tell you, hey, this is what works and this is what not works, and you follow their guidance when they're good mentors, it actually works. I worked my way through the MBA, and with the first, I think I did reasonably well. And the London graduation also was pretty fun. On another thing, self-leadership, I decided in April 25 that I wanted to lose some weight. And full disclosure here, I was at 145 kilograms back then, and I lost 51 kilograms in a bit more than 6 months by diet change. And how did I do that? First, of course, you go to a doctor and get some advice on it. But then I used AI, which supported me to create habits. I trained an AI to give me certain habits for breakfast, for lunch, for afternoon, for dinner. And I always said, I'm not going to be one of these people who go for diet and then I just bounce back afterwards. So I told I need to find something, when I change my diet, I need to find something which I can eat in the future. Because the AI said something like, oh, you could eat cucumbers. They hardly have any calories. And you know, that's exactly how a cucumber tastes like. It tastes exactly like I have no calories. And I was like, I ate that and thought, if I have to eat this, I lose my will to live. So I said, okay, not this one. We have to take something else. And then the AI adapted, and helped me to find new healthy patterns. And that, I mean, when you look at old pictures of me, you see where I was and where I am today, and it works. But as soon as someone tells you there's this one habit, I can tell you, anyone telling you something about success habit is always you have to go to the gym 3 times a week. You have to get up 5 a.m. in the morning. You have to work 80 hours a week. No, you don't. There are many people who don't do that and who are still successful. The number one thing you have to define first is, what is your goal of success? Some people say lots of money. Okay, cool. I don't think that external validation, because many people want to have money to show something off on their social media account. And when we look into science, Dr. Keltner from University of California, Berkeley has found out by scientific research, external validation is the way to unhappiness, because you always need more. When people give you the clap, clap, clap on Instagram for your Ferrari, that's over after 2 days. So what's the next big thing? And you have to you get addicted to external validation. So number one is set yourself the goal. What is your way where you think happiness is? And if someone had told me that I am where I am today, I live a minimalist lifestyle. So I live out of one carry-on suitcase. I live in small spaces. I'm traveling quite frequently, only by train if possible, airline only when there's no other option. If anyone had told me that 30 years ago, I had laughed at their faces. I said, no, I want to have a good car. I want to have a large space. And I had that, and hear the news, I wasn't happy there. So sometimes you set yourself a goal, and when you reach it, you realize it's part of the journey, but it's not the final stop. This is why often people say happiness is going the way, not reaching the goal. So, and then you have one step and you move on to the next one.
Wow, that's really profound. Really, like
School of
news.
hard knocks. It's that's
The school of
basically,
the
yeah.
hard knock life. But it's like I had all that, but was I happy? No.
Yeah. And basically, I mean, why did I buy a place? Quite simple. My parents told me, look, life goes the following. You grow up, you go to school, you go to uni, you study, and then you work, and you put money aside to buy a place. And then you live there for 40 years, and you do this job for 40 years, and then you retire. And then the fun part starts. And when I started to follow this path, it's not for me. It's not the job I want to do. of course, you go into territory where you know no one can help you. Some people can become self-employed and they have a safety net. And one thing that was a really good thing that my parents did. My parents said, okay, we have a long-standing history of public service. You decided to do differently. It's your choice. However, be aware there's no financial safety net. So when you drop the ball, you need to have some savings. So I was obsessed with savings for a long, long time, and I probably still am. And there's a certain time where you think, am I too obsessed with this? And then a pandemic happened, and I thought, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Absolutely not. No. So you will probably first live the life that other people tell you that you should live. And on the way doing that, you find out what is it that you actually like and what is it that you do not like. Just to give you another example, people always I listen to electronic music. So probably when there's an electronic music club on this planet, I've probably been there when it's a relevant and good one. And people always told me, okay, you will get more calm. That is what people told me when I was 23. And now I'm in my mid-40s, and I'm still going out at least 2 nights per week when I can. When I have, I never go out when I have client contact next day, but I at least go out twice per week to electronic music. And I'm now in my mid-40s. So some people are, at your age? And yes, at my age. Yeah, yes, at my age. Here we are. And that's something which just genuinely makes me happy. And don't live the life other people tell you to copy. Find your own way. You can get hints and help, but you have to find your own way to happiness. If you can't be happy with yourself, you cannot be happy with anyone else.
Period. There we
Period.
go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
full stop.
I wanted to talk to you and ask your opinion on why you think perception is so important and crucial in leadership today.
Because there are way too many people out there who think that they have a neutral point of view on the matter. And we are all, not only with unconscious biases, we have filters, we have our echo chambers. Let's just face it, I was fortunately never unemployed. But when you stand there from the outside world, maybe with a privileged background, which I had one big plus. My family comes from German public service and teachers, so education was valued. And you have to acknowledge it's a privilege when you have parents who say education is important and you focus on that. When you have parents who say it's all pointless, try to do anything because this whole world is actually already messed up, that is a massive disadvantage. Perception means that some people put their opinion out there and they think they have a neutral point of view. We are always watching at the world through our filter bubbles and echo chambers and unconscious biases. And if you want to have a less filtered view, look into science. I know this is not a popular point of view because people say, I really don't like to look into science. It's so much reading. Yeah, because it's not a comic strip. That's one of the main reasons. But we now have different aspects. We have professors on YouTube. We have them on Instagram who really are able to bring things down. You have people like Professor Teal Neely from Harvard University, 4,000 pages of published studies brought into one book, Remote Work Revolution, to tell you how to make remote work. So you have to look into science. But when you think you have a neutral point of view just by your perception, you are so absorbed by your ego, and you probably need it already, that you're harming other people around you. Perception simply means you have a point of view and you might have an opinion, but it doesn't mean that what you say is the ultimate point of truth. You can tell people, hey, my perception is X, Y, Z. When you tell a salesperson, hey, in my opinion, you're not reaching your goal, and they say, I think I will reach my goal. And you say, okay, we are now in November. You are at 75%. We only have a month and a half left. What do you want to do to reach your goal? And they say, oh, I just keep going. Then you can say, okay, look, you have no plan, and we only have probably 10-15% of the year left, and you're lacking 25%. Now I have to help you. Then you have something which is more than perception. You have facts, you have proof, you have evidence. But simply telling people, yeah, I think you're less motivated. And then they say, why do you think so? Yeah, it's my perception. I think so. It's just, for me, you're less motivated than last year. Yeah, but why? Yeah, other people say that as well. Who's saying that? Oh, I can't tell you. It's confidential. That is nonsense. Straightforward, and also really bad leadership. Be aware when you have perception and someone is challenging your perception, you either deliver facts, proof, and evidence, or you have to reconsider your point of view. For a very long time, because as someone coming from a small village, when I made it into the pharmaceutical UK company, of course, I started telling people, look, hard work simply pays off. And I told people, when you work hard, you will get the result. And other people who don't have a career didn't work hard enough. And then my boss took me aside, a really, really good boss I had, an excellent leader who said, look, Niels, I really appreciate you putting this out. But just to give you one point of view, you just spoke in front of the board. Let's just say instead of you as a white man, we in the same spot. We were at the end of the 90s. Yeah, he said, let's Let's just put a black woman there. You think the board is listening in the same way to her? I said, well, they should. And he said, that's not my question. Do you think they will? I said, I am not sure. Of course, you feel uncomfortable saying that. And that's where my boss said, Niels, you worked hard and you achieved quite something with it. However, there are certain things which are birthright privileges. And some of them I have. I'm white, I'm male, I'm cisgender, massive birthright privileges. I'm not straight, so here we are. So I don't tick the fourth one. We have to acknowledge our privileges, and we have to see that perception we have. If we do not challenge our perception, we will be bad leaders, because we suddenly think, because we are successful, do what I say, and when you do it the way I tell you, you will be equally successful. That is not only straightforward nonsense and unscientific, it is harming other people, because they copy your behavior and it's not working for them. And then you start to do something which often in the motivational space happens. It's called victim blaming. They tell people who are really in challenging life situations, oh, it's all your fault, and the solution is my next online class, and the solution is my next book, and then the solution is my next event and my mastermind. And they rip people off of the last penny of their credit cards with a blink of an eye. They are even poorer than before and do not get any help. We have to challenge our perception. And again, science is the way. There are many ways how to approach science. You don't have to do it like back in the days, reading thousands of papers. There are many ways how to approach science. But when you get advice from someone with no scientific evidence to their name, doesn't have to be a degree. There's Coursera, there are edX, where you can get university level qualifications. But when people are just strongly opinionated, you run a high risk of not getting great advice.
And would you say that moment with your boss was like defining for you and how you look at things going forward?
Absolutely.
A big
Absolutely.
life lesson.
Absolutely. I mean, of course, first, you don't like to hear when someone tells you it's not all hard work from you. You don't like to hear that, because you think, I worked hard for this. Yeah, and he acknowledged that. However, I heard certain birthright privileges. I mean, when I were not born, I mean, Northern Germany, small village, is probably not the place where you start your own business and get into free enterprise. And when you come from a public service family, you have no network, you have no open doors, you have to do cold calling, so it's way harder. However, if I were born in a, let's say, less developed country, which is not industrialized, which does not have a strong economy, it's not just about hard work. Where do you want to do hard work when there's no work available? Because when someone says it's just hard work, anyone who has no career wasn't just working hard enough. Do you want to say that people who are extremely poor in less developed countries are all lazy? Is that your message here? So we have to stick to the evidence. And sometimes it's less pleasant to say, I had privileges and I make the most out of them, but you have to acknowledge them and then help others to get up the ladder as well. Just fair game.
100%. I wanted to talk about like leadership and conflict, and how should a leader, in your opinion, approach conflict, and healthy conflict in the workplace versus unhealthy conflict.
So first thing, until the end of the 90s, we were still approaching conflict saying you have to avoid conflict. I remember when I learned in the workplace, you have to avoid conflict. Working with less conflict is great. And then science found out that's not correct. Anything, any challenge, any change in the market happened by conflict. Why did suddenly we have another driving service than calling a taxi? Why did you suddenly have an app? Because someone said, I think the status quo of the taxi industry is not that pleasant. We should have other options. Someone challenged it. That is healthy conflict. Unhealthy conflict is when someone doesn't talk about that for a way too long time. Anyone knows the conflict is there, but no one addresses that. And suddenly it escalates. I give you just a very simple idea of that. We had that moment where in Germany, certain papers were leaked. And then suddenly the news broke where people suddenly got to read, listen, Michal, extremely wealthy people have offshore bank accounts. And the whole country went like, no. So who could have thought? No one knew, except like anyone knew, but no one cared. And that is, of course, a really big example. But let's face it, in many organizations, you have conflicts where anyone knows this conflict is ongoing. We have the conflict between these two people or in this team or about this product, and no one addresses it. And you think it's going to disappear by just not talking about that. And by the way, I did this in my business as well. We had a CRM system, which I programmed by myself on Microsoft Access. And when people told me we need a new CRM system, I just told them, I think the one we have is really, really good. Maybe I was a bit obsessed because I programmed that by myself. And yes, you can work with 50 people on an Access database. You just shouldn't. It's not created for that. So at a certain point, it escalated. My sales team told me it's unbearable to work with this. And I told them, okay, give me a list of things my CRM cannot do. and someone pulled a piece of paper out, which was obviously prepared, put it on the table, more than 50 aspects on there, and we went through it bit by bit, and 95% were correct. Okay, we need a new CRM system. And then we got a new CRM system. And that process was led by the sales people, because I told them, okay, you make the decision. I will go by the decision. However, then no one can complain afterwards that you don't like the software because you chose it. However, the year before, I had completely pointless ongoing conflicts by insisting that my system is better than theirs. And I mean, we all know these moments, probably you listening to this and watching this as well. Salespeople out there say, hey, our sales tool isn't really helping with sales. I'm basically becoming an office admin person. It's not really helping salespeople to do sales. And then people say, yeah, it's just the way it goes. Or someone says, it's compliance. Compliance department insists on that. Yeah, you can do compliance and still have a great sales tool. You just have to put the effort into that. And we have many ongoing conflicts which are not addressed, and then they escalate massively at a certain point. And anyone is wondering, how could that have happened? So be proactive about the conflicts. As soon as you address them, people also perceive you and see you as a better leader because they see that you actually care. Excellent leaders care about proactive conflict.
There we go. Niels, thank you so much.
Thank you.